Hi, and welcome to Coffee and Pearls, Wisdom for Catholic Moms. I'm Sterling, and today we're talking about the book Deep Conversion, Deep Prayer by Father Thomas Dubay, I think. And I really enjoyed this book. I think they lay out a really wonderful plan for how to experience a deeper conversion in your own faith life, and doing that by being more prayerful. And he asks a lot of challenging questions in this book, and it's a little dry and hard to get through, but there's a lot of gems of information that I found to be really helpful and, again, challenging to me. I made a lot of highlights in this book, but there were two quotes in particular that I wanted to share with you ladies today that I felt were particularly relevant to being a Catholic mom and the challenges that we face. So this first quote is a little long, but stick with me. I think every part of it is really wonderful. Seek and practice all the virtues. And in this example, the virtue of temperance in your use of food and drink. Select what you shall eat and drink in accordance with what is best for your health, not what may flatter your taste buds but damage your well-being and ability to serve others as well. He is also saying, be moderate and realistically motivated. In other words, be converted. Give up your self-centeredness and love truth, goodness, and beauty. No matter how far you are advanced or how wayward you are in your spiritual life, if this fundamental change is taking place, you are on your way up, on your way to becoming beautiful. It may take time, but it can happen with the grace of God, which is always present. Now, there's a lot to unpack here, and it's speaking specifically to the virtue of temperance, and so moderating our extreme behaviors. And in this example, they're talking about eating too much food or drinking too much alcohol, but that may not be the particular thing that you suffer with. You may shop too much as an escape from your world, or maybe you spend too much time on the internet and you kind of push your kids aside to do that and get grumpy at them when they get in your way. And so we all have worldly things that we latch onto to soothe ourselves. And this particular section is talking about how, as we seek to have a deeper conversion in our souls and to be more like Christ and to grow more with Christ, we have to work on letting those things go. And I really think this is going to be a lifelong challenge for all of us. I don't think, we're going to purpose to do this and wake up and have solved all of these problems. And I think whatever particular thing you struggle with is probably something that you're going to struggle with for your whole life. So, I don't struggle with drinking too much alcohol, but I do really struggle with eating too much food. And I think that's something that I'm always going to have to be conscious of. And as I read this book, it put in my heart this challenge to become a saint. And I know so many of us feel like chasing that dream of being a saint feels impossible. But nothing is impossible with God. And I was reading in my Bible, Corinthians, this week, and I came upon this scripture quote, 1 Corinthians 12:3, without his Holy Spirit, we can do nothing. And so it's okay for you to have that moment and feel like, oh, I can't do this. There's no way that I could give up my chocolate chips or my trips to Target or my Netflix hour that I love, or Netflix 3 hours if that's what you're doing. But you can do it. You can do it with the help of God. And he's going to recognize all of those baby steps that you're making along the way. And I love specifically in the quote that it says, you are on your way up. This is something you're going to be working on for a long time, but celebrate those small changes, and you are on your way to becoming beautiful. And this book wasn't specifically written for women, but I think that speaks to the heart of women, and that the more we give up our attachment, our clinging to worldly things, the more genuine beauty we're going to have, and the more that Christ's love is going to shine through us. And in the book, he talks about how humans in particular, we have a remarkable resistance to deeper conversion. So even though our soul is crying out for this conversion, it's kind of juxtaposed against, the fall and the sin of man. And so we're going to have, again, what he calls remarkable resistance to doing this. And after reading that, it made me feel brave, and it made me feel strong, and it made me able to recognize that resistance, just kind of name it for what it was, and then to push through and to seek out that deep conversion. And again, the way that we're doing that in this particular example is by identifying those worldly things that we're using to soothe ourselves and saying, you know what, I'm going to choose Jesus instead. And I'm going to cling to him. And it may take us our whole lives to figure out how to do that, but this book is saying we have to dedicate our whole lives to figuring out how to do that. So that brings me to the second quote that I wanted to cover. And that is, people who are profoundly intimate with their indwelling Lord are never bored. Boredom and genuine joy are incompatible. Selfishness diminishes a person's liveliness and capacity to enjoy reality and to grow in the best of human relationships. And when I read this, it really spoke to me because I know for myself that the more that I cling to worldly things like eating a lot of food or watching a lot of television or even shopping for a lot of clothes, I experience those bursts of joy. Perhaps joy is the wrong word, excitement or glittery distraction. And it feels good in the moment that I'm doing it. But inevitably, if I'm using those things to soothe myself from something else that's happening in my life, I always experience more sadness afterwards. And it's taken me this long to really be able to identify that, to see that, I'll buy a bunch of clothes and I think, oh, that's going to make me feel better. And then the next week I kind of feel yucky about myself. And I don't always see the immediate connection between buying the clothes and feeling bad about myself later, but it's very consistent that that's what happens to me. And so I don't think that eating food or watching TV or buying clothes is bad in any way. But when I do it to escape some anxiety that I'm feeling, if I'm just so tired of listening to my kids all day long because, 4-year-old questions and 2-year-old crying can really grate on you after 12 hours, 7 days a week. And so sometimes I just want to escape that and, buy some clothes or marathon something on Netflix or eat a cheesecake, right? But when I'm using those things to soothe my anxiety, that's when I feel really crummy about myself the next week. And my husband will ask me, he'll say, hey, what's going on with you? And I'll say, oh, I don't know. I feel really bad. I feel like I'm failing as a mom and I'm just getting everything wrong. And, I want to be a good wife and a good mother, but I'm just blowing it. And usually when I say that, it's following one of those activities. And it may, like I said, be a few days or even a week later, but it almost always follows. And so when I read this quote, I thought, wow, that's me. I'm filling my boredom with these worldly things instead of choosing activities that bring me genuine joy. And so now when I find myself getting a little bit anxious, I try to identify the kind of category of thing that's making me anxious and to do an activity related to that brings me genuine joy. So if my kids are really driving me nuts, I will just stop and say, okay, be calm. The kids are driving you nuts. Why don't you pick something that brings you genuine joy that you can celebrate with them? And so this just happened to me last week, and I was feeling a little bit cooped up and a little bit antsy with them, and I thought, let's go on a leaf hunt. And so we went outside. I stopped everything I was doing, and I went outside with them, and we just picked up different leaves. And that's the kind of activity that I think about all the time, but rarely get around to doing. And so I picked this activity. I gave my whole heart to them. And we just found a bunch of leaves and they were so happy, and that brought me such genuine joy. And I think, if you're struggling with your relationship with your husband, you can do the same thing. Pick an activity that you know always brings the two of you together and choose that. For my husband and I, it's often, we have one of those swinging benches in our backyard. And if we just take 10 minutes and sit on that bench together and hold hands, even if we're not talking, that tends to bring both of us a lot of peace, which I think really comes from genuine joy. And so identify the thing that's making you feel anxious. Purpose to not soothe that anxiety with whatever your worldly thing is. Try to practice temperance, because this book is talking about virtues, and really temperance is what we're talking about here. And so practice temperance. Choose a different activity that brings you genuine joy instead. And I know that sounds pretty difficult, because it's been difficult for me even after reading this to implement that, but I'm really trying. And it's been about 6 months since I've read this book, and it's made a pretty big difference in my life. It's given me a vocabulary and a process for dealing with my anxiety and recognizing that I'm not solving it by turning to cheesecake. So just to wrap up the 2 points that we covered today, I want you to think about what things that you are using to soothe yourself, and ask yourself, what are you clinging to with remarkable resistance? Identify that remarkable resistance and see if you can call it out for what it is and overcome it. And the second thing, what worldly things are you turning to for soothing that you could instead replace with activities that bring you genuine joy? I really appreciate you joining me for this episode of Coffee and Pearls. Don't forget to visit my website, where I cover a third quote from the book and some wisdom about that quote. You can sign up for my email updates to get a free worksheet that covers this episode and gives you some questions to answer, so you can actually work through what we've talked about today. Check out all my social media things so you can connect with me, and please let me know how I can pray for you. I would love to be praying for you this week. Thank you for being a part of Coffee and Pearls, and have a blessed day.